Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I live with my roommate, and for the most part, things have been decent. We split the rent evenly, keep the common areas clean, and generally stay out of each other's way. The apartment is nothing fancy, just a basic two-bedroom place near campus that we can afford on our student budgets. I'm a junior studying computer science, working part-time at the campus tech support desk to help cover expenses. My roommate works at some office downtown doing data entry or something equally mind-numbing. But there's this one thing that's been driving me absolutely insane. My roommate has this terrible habit of just borrowing my stuff without asking. And by borrowing, I mean straight up taking and never returning. It started small with things like my phone charger or a pen here and there. Then it escalated to my shampoo, my coffee, and worst of all, my food. I'm not exactly rolling in cash, so when I buy groceries or treats, I plan them out carefully. I'll grab some snacks, put them in my room thinking they're safe, and by the time I'm craving them later, boom, they're gone. When I ask about it, my roommate always gives me the same response about just having a couple and not thinking I'd mind. I point out that they ate the entire bag of chips I bought yesterday, and they promise to replace it next time they're at the store. Spoiler alert! It never gets replaced. This went on for months. My granola bars, my leftover pizza, my cookies, even my fancy instant ramen that I splurged on as a study snack. I tried hiding things in my room, but somehow they still managed to find their way into my roommate's stomach. I tried talking about it calmly, multiple times, but nothing changed. Last week was brutal. I had 3 midterms, a major project due, and my boss at work had been extra demanding. I was completely drained and stressed out of my mind. When I finally finished my last exam on Friday, I decided to treat myself. I stopped by the grocery store and splurged on this giant bag of flamin' hot Cheetos. They're my absolute weakness, and I'd been craving them all week. I brought them home and put them in my room with a very clear note taped to the bag that said I would end them if they ate these. I figured the dramatic threat would finally get the message across. I was looking forward to having them while I caught up on my favorite show over the weekend. Saturday morning, I woke up excited to enjoy my Cheetos while binge watching. I went to my room and naturally, they were gone. Completely disappeared. The note was still there, but the bag was nowhere to be found. I found the empty bag in the kitchen trash, not even hidden or anything. I was furious, but I'm not really the type to start yelling and cause drama. Plus, I knew that direct confrontation hadn't worked before, so I decided it was time for some creative problem solving. I knew my roommate's routine well. Every morning they grab their laptop and work notes from their backpack and head to the office. They have this desk job where they basically sit in one spot all day and hate getting up once they're settled in. They're also incredibly particular about keeping their work stuff organized and professional. That evening, while we were hanging out watching TV like nothing had happened, I put my plan into action. I waited until my roommate went to the bathroom, then I quietly snuck over to their backpack. I unzipped the main compartment and found what I was looking for, the bottom pocket where they keep their pens and other small work supplies. I had bought another bag of Cheetos earlier that day, but not to eat. I opened the bag and started crushing them up into the finest Cheeto dust I could manage. Then I carefully poured the orange powder and crushed pieces into that bottom pocket. I made sure to get it really deep in there and spread it around so it would coat everything. The whole pocket was basically a bright orange disaster waiting to happen. My roommate came back and we continued watching TV like normal. I was trying so hard not to smile knowing what was coming the next morning. Monday morning arrived and my roommate went through their usual routine. They grabbed their backpack, said goodbye, and headed off to work. I spent the day at classes and work, periodically checking my phone and waiting. Around 2 p.m. I got the text I've been expecting. My roommate was furious and demanding to know what I had done to their bag. I played innocent and asked what they were talking about. They explained that there was orange stuff everywhere covering their laptop, papers, and pens. I acted confused and wondered how Cheetos could have gotten in their bag. My roommate told me not to play dumb because they knew it was me. I responded that maybe if they didn't eat my Cheetos, Cheetos wouldn't have mysteriously appeared in their bag. They were even more upset when they told me they had a meeting with their boss that day and asked if I knew how embarrassing it was to pull out bright orange paperwork. I told them it sounded like a personal problem. I found out later that they'd been in the middle of preparing for an important presentation when they reached into their bag for their notes. Apparently, orange dust went everywhere, coating their laptop screen, their carefully organized documents, and even getting on their shirt. They had to spend 20 minutes in the office bathroom trying to clean everything off before their meeting. My roommate was absolutely livid for the rest of the day. They came home that evening still brushing orange residue off their work clothes and muttering about having to explain to their boss why their presentation materials looked like they'd been attacked by a bag of snacks. When they confronted me that evening, they said this was completely over the line. I told them that eating someone's food when they asked them not to was what was over the line. They argued that it was just Cheetos, and I agreed, asking why they couldn't leave them alone then. We had a pretty tense evening, but by the next day, something had shifted. My roommate actually apologized for taking my food and admitted that the Cheeto incident was probably fair payback. They even offered to buy me a new bag of Flamin' Hot Cheetos, which they actually followed through on. It's been 2 weeks now and my food has remained completely untouched. I've tested it with various snacks and treats, and everything stays exactly where I left it. My younger brother got married 2 years ago to this woman who seemed nice enough at first. They had their first baby 5 months ago, and since I live just 10 minutes away, I've been trying to help out when I can. My brother works at a manufacturing plant, pulling 40 to 50-hour weeks to support his new family. It's physically demanding work, and he leaves the house at 6 in the morning and doesn't get back until after 6 in the evening most days. His wife stays home with the baby, which I thought was a good arrangement since childcare costs are crazy expensive these days. I started noticing things weren't quite right about 2 months ago. The first time I dropped by to bring them some groceries, I found her lying in bed with the baby crying in the next room. She told me she was just tired and asked if I could handle the baby for a bit. I didn't think much of it then. New parents are supposed to be exhausted, right? But then it kept happening. Every single time I visited, the same scene played out. She'd be in bed with her phone or laptop, the house would be a disaster and the baby would either be crying or looking like he needed attention. Empty bottles scattered around, dirty diapers sitting in the corner, laundry piled up so high you couldn't see the couch. The breaking point came last weekend. My brother called me around 7 in the evening and I could hear the stress in his voice. He asked me to come over because he really needed help. When I asked what was going on, he explained that he had just gotten home and nothing had been done all day. The baby had been crying and he was trying to make dinner but couldn't put the little one down. When I got there, the scene was even worse than I expected. My brother was standing in the kitchen bouncing the baby with one arm while trying to stir a pot of pasta with the other. He looked completely overwhelmed, still in his work clothes, sweat on his forehead from rushing around. I asked where she was and he told me she was upstairs. He said she had mentioned needing to rest. I looked around the living room. There were at least 6 dirty bottles on the coffee table, the baby's blankets were scattered everywhere, and I could smell that the trash needed to be taken out. This wasn't just a bad day. This was neglect. When I asked how long she had been upstairs, he said since he got home, maybe longer. He told me the baby was already crying when he walked in the door. I took the baby from him so he could focus on cooking. The poor little guy was hungry and had a soiled diaper that looked like it hadn't been changed in hours. While my brother finished making dinner, I fed the baby, changed him, and started cleaning up the worst of the mess. After about an hour, we had managed to get things under control. The baby was calm, we had eaten something, and the living room looked halfway decent. She still hadn't come downstairs. I told my brother I was going to check on her. He suggested I leave her alone because she gets upset when people bother her, but I couldn't just leave it alone. I went upstairs and found her lying in bed, laptop open, watching some show on Netflix. She didn't even look up when I knocked on the door frame. I asked if she was feeling okay, and she said she was just a bit exhausted. She said it like it was the most normal thing in the world, like she hadn't just left her husband to handle everything after a 10-hour workday. I mentioned that I had noticed the baby needed some attention when I got there. She responded that he was always fussy and there was nothing she could do about it. That's when I lost it. I tried to keep my voice level, but I was furious. I told her that being at home didn't mean she always had to be in bed scrolling and watching TV shows. I said her husband worked 50 hours a week and still came home to take care of the baby while she did nothing. Her face crumpled immediately, and she started crying these dramatic, loud sobs. She yelled that I didn't understand how hard this was and that I didn't have kids, so I had no right to judge her. I told her I wasn't judging her for struggling, but for not even trying. She screamed at me to get out of her room and called me cruel. I left her there and went back downstairs. My brother was cleaning bottles in the kitchen, and I could tell he had heard the whole thing. I apologized if I had overstepped, but said someone needed to say something. He said he knew things were hard, but I didn't need to make her cry. I pointed out that she wasn't the only one having a hard time and that he was exhausted too, but he just shook his head and asked me to leave. I could tell he was torn between defending his wife and acknowledging that I wasn't wrong. The next day, my brother called me. He said she wanted an apology and that she thought I was completely out of line. When I asked what I should apologize for, he said she was dealing with postpartum depression and that I didn't understand what she was going through. I told him that if that was the case, she needed to get help, not lie in bed all day while he did everything. He just asked me to apologize and said he needed peace in his house. I thought about it for a few days, but I couldn't bring myself to apologize for telling the truth. Instead, I did some research and found resources for new parents struggling with mental health. I also looked up local house cleaning services and meal delivery options. A week later, I showed up at their house with printed information about postpartum depression support groups and therapy options. I also had contact information for affordable cleaning services and offered to pay for a month of meal delivery. I explained that if she was really struggling with depression, these resources could help, and if the house and cooking were too much, these services could take some pressure off. My brother looked at the papers for a long time. He said she wouldn't want to admit she needed help. I told him that was on her, but he shouldn't have to carry everything alone. She came downstairs then, probably drawn by our voices. She asked what all the papers were about. I explained they were resources that might help if she was really struggling. She said she didn't need therapy and just needed people to stop judging her. I told her nobody was judging her for having a hard time, but her husband was drowning and her baby deserved better. She looked at the papers, then at my brother and said, "We all thought she was a bad mother." My brother said no, but maybe they could use some help. That conversation ended with her storming back upstairs, but something must have gotten through. 2 days later, my brother texted me that she had called one of the therapists and scheduled an appointment. It's been 3 weeks now, and things are slowly getting better. She started seeing a counselor twice a week, and they hired a cleaning service to come once a week. My brother still does more than his share, but at least now she's trying to contribute instead of just hiding in bed. She hasn't apologized to me, and honestly, I don't expect her to, but my brother seems less stressed, and the baby is getting the attention he needs. I was 16 when I watched my chemistry teacher's career end in the worst possible way. Mr. Henderson had taught at Lincoln High for 20 years by the time I got into his 5th period advanced chemistry class. He used to be known as strict but fair. Maya transferred to our school in February after her accident. She'd been the top science student at Riverside High before the drunk driver hit her car on a Friday night. 6 weeks in the hospital. Permanent vision loss. Her parents fought to get her into Lincoln instead of the specialized school. The school spent months preparing for her arrival. New software, modified equipment, a full-time aide. The whole thing cost $1,500 just for the computer programs. On Maya's first day, she came in 10 minutes early with her aide, Miss Rodriguez. She had a white cane and a golden retriever guide dog named Max. Her desk had a computer that read everything out loud and a device that turned text into braille. I sat 3 rows behind her. so I saw everything that happened. At first, Mr. Henderson tried to accommodate her. He described what he wrote on the board and made sure she had the right materials, but I could see him getting more frustrated every day. Class moved slower, simple tasks became complicated. The aide had to interrupt constantly. Lab procedures that used to take 5 minutes now took 20. Maya handled it all perfectly. She participated in discussions, asked good questions, and kept up with the work better than half our class. Mr. Henderson saw it differently. I started noticing little things. The way he'd sigh when he had to repeat something for Maya. How he'd pause with irritation when the aide needed help. The edge in his voice when he talked to her. The breaking point came during our chemical reactions unit. Mr. Henderson had planned this demonstration with solutions that changed from clear to blue to red. He'd been talking about it for weeks. When the day came, he set up his equipment and looked around the classroom. His eyes stopped on Maya. "This demonstration won't be relevant for you since it's entirely visual," he said, looking right at her. "You can sit this one out." Maya said she'd like to participate if he could describe what was happening. Ms. Rodriguez offered to help explain the color changes. That's when Mr. Henderson lost it. "The whole point is seeing the reaction," he said, his voice getting louder. "There's no point in you being here for this." The room went silent. Maya said she understood but would still like to try. She explained that she was keeping up with everything else. "I don't have time to narrate every single thing that happens," he shot back. "Maybe you should consider transferring to the school for the blind, where they're equipped to handle your needs." Maya said she wanted to stay here with her friends. This was her school too. "Your friends won't be able to help you in the real world," he said. "You need to accept your limitations and stop expecting everyone else to accommodate them." Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. I just want to learn chemistry like everyone else." "What you want and what's realistic are two different things," Mr. Henderson said. "You're holding back the entire class with your special needs." Then he turned away and started his demonstration, ignoring the tears in Maya's eyes. After class, 5 of us gathered by the door with our phones out. We were texting everyone we knew about what just happened. Maya was absent the next 2 days. When she came back Thursday, she was different. The confident student who joined our class was gone. She sat in the back corner, never raised her hand, barely spoke to her aide. During Friday's lab, I was working when I noticed Maya at the back table. She was using modified measuring devices that beeped when they reached the right amount. Max lay beside her chair. Mr. Henderson was walking between the lab stations when he passed Maya's table. I heard him say just loud enough for nearby students to hear that some people just can't take a hint. What happened next still gives me nightmares. When Mr. Henderson kept walking, he stretched his foot out slightly. Maya stepped forward to reach for equipment and caught her ankle on his foot. She stumbled hard, hands shooting out to break her fall. She hit the lab table first, then crashed to the floor. The beaker she'd been holding shattered, sending glass and chemicals everywhere. The room erupted. Students rushed to help Maya while others backed away from the spill. Ms. Rodriguez dropped beside her, checking for injuries. Max whined. "We all knew it wasn't an accident." "Did you just trip her on purpose?" Jessica from the front row demanded. Mr. Henderson said it was an accident, that Maya had walked into his foot. "We heard what you said yesterday and just now," Marcus called out. I remembered my phone was still recording from when I'd started documenting the lab. I held it up. "I got the whole thing," I said. Mr. Henderson's face went white. "Recording without permission is against school policy," he said weakly. "So is deliberately tripping a blind student," I shot back. Other students were pulling out their phones, taking pictures, typing messages. Within minutes, my video was shared to our group chat, then to social media, then everywhere. By evening, it had gone viral. The local news picked it up by 6 p.m. Parents were calling for Mr. Henderson's termination. The teachers' union distanced themselves from his actions. Mr. Henderson never came back to school. The termination happened quickly. The video evidence was clear. The state education board revoked his teaching license after multiple students testified about his behavior toward students with disabilities. He lost his $68,000 salary. His pension, worth over $400,000, was gone. Last I heard, he was working at an electronics store, making $12 an hour. Meanwhile, Maya not only stayed at Lincoln but thrived. She graduated as valedictorian with a 4.0 GPA. She got a full scholarship to study chemistry at the state university. She earned her doctorate and now works as a research scientist. My daughter started her senior year 3 weeks ago, and everything seemed normal until this past Friday when she came home looking frustrated. She's always been level-headed, my kid. Captain of the girls' soccer team, good grades, doesn't let status go to her head, like some of these other students do. She works hard for everything she gets and doesn't expect special treatment from anyone. The trouble started in the student parking lot. My daughter had been parking in different spots each day since school started, just grabbing whatever was available when she arrived. It's a pretty standard setup, first come, first serve, no assigned spots for students. The school made that clear during orientation. Friday morning, she pulled into an empty spot near the back of the lot. Nothing fancy, just a regular parking space. When she was getting out of her car, another vehicle pulled up behind her and started honking. My daughter asked what was going on. The driver rolled down her window. It was the head cheerleader, someone my daughter recognized but didn't really know personally. The cheerleader rudely told my daughter that she was in her spot. My daughter explained that the spot wasn't reserved for anyone. The cheerleader insisted it was where she always parked, but my daughter pointed out that she'd been at school every day since it started and had never seen the cheerleader park there once. The cheerleader huffed and drove off to find another space. Between first and second period, my daughter was at her locker when the cheerleader approached her again. She demanded that my daughter move her car immediately, or she would call a tow truck. My daughter reminded her that there were no reserved parking spots and that walking a little farther wouldn't hurt her legs. The cheerleader then bragged about being the head cheerleader, like that gave her special privileges. My daughter responded by mentioning she was captain of the soccer team, but that it didn't give either of them special parking rights. Right then, one of the teachers walked by and noticed the raised voices. The teacher asked what was happening. The cheerleader immediately switched to victim mode, claiming my daughter had stolen her parking spot on purpose and that she always parked there. The teacher reminded both girls that there were no assigned parking spots in the student lot and told them to stop making a big deal out of nothing. The teacher walked away and my daughter headed to homeroom. She figured the whole thing was settled. When she returned to her locker after first period, she found 3 sticky notes plastered across the front. Each one said "parking space thief" written in different colored pens. My daughter pulled them off and went straight to the principal's office. The principal called the behavior completely unacceptable and promised to handle it immediately. My daughter went to her second period class, which happened to be one she shared with a cheerleader. About halfway through the lesson, the PA system crackled to life. The voice over the intercom called for the head cheerleader to report to the principal's office immediately. My daughter told me the girl looked panicked and angry at the same time. I thought the situation was handled until I got home from work and found my daughter filling me in on everything. I gave her some advice about dealing with entitled people, but I figured the school had taken care of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I was outside getting my mail when a car came speeding down our street way too fast. I pulled out my phone and hit record, thinking I might catch someone driving recklessly through our neighborhood. The car screeched to a halt in front of my house, and out stepped a woman I'd never seen before. She walked right up to me with fire in her eyes. The woman angrily demanded to know what was wrong with my daughter taking her daughter's parking spot. I slipped my phone into my pocket, still recording. I explained that the school didn't assign spots to students and that it was first come, first serve. The woman then went into a bizarre rant about how her daughter needed that specific parking spot because she would be cursed with bad luck without it. She claimed her daughter wouldn't get into the college she wanted, and that the spot was lucky because her 3 other kids had all had good luck when they parked there. I laughed and told her that luck was something you made for yourself, not some superstition about a parking space. I turned to head back toward my house, but then she screamed something that made my blood run cold. She warned that my daughter better watch herself on the soccer field and around school, saying she would hate to see what happened to that famous figure skater happen to my daughter. I knew exactly what she was referencing, and it wasn't subtle. I kept walking until I got inside, then immediately checked my phone recording. I had captured every word of her threat. Within an hour, I was at the police station filing a report. The officer took the threat seriously, especially given the specific reference to the attack on the Olympic figure skater years ago. The officer told me they would pay her a visit that day, and that this kind of behavior was completely unacceptable. I also called the school principal and sent over the audio recording. The principal was appalled and promised that both mother and daughter would face what they deserved. The school had zero tolerance for threats against students. The next day, my daughter told me the cheerleader had been suspended for a week for harassment. Her mother was banned from school property and had been visited by the police with a formal warning about making threats. But what happened a week later was even better. My daughter was at her locker when the cheerleader returned from suspension. The girl walked up looking sheepish and apologized for what had happened and for what her mother had said to me. My daughter reminded her that her mother had threatened her over a parking space. The cheerleader admitted it was embarrassing and revealed that her mother had been arrested the day before for violating the restraining order by driving past our house again. Apparently, the woman couldn't let it go and had been caught on a neighbor's security camera slowly driving by our house multiple times. The police had upgraded their warning to an actual arrest. My daughter suggested that maybe next time she should just park wherever there was an open spot like everyone else. The cheerleader agreed and walked away. My daughter hasn't had any more parking lot drama since. We installed a dash cam in her car just to be safe, but it seems like the message got through to both mother and daughter. I'm 29 and had been living with two other guys for about 4 years. We had a good thing going. Everyone paid their share on time, we kept the place clean enough, and we generally stayed out of each other's way. The younger guy was 27 and worked in tech, while the older one was 30 and did construction. We weren't best friends or anything, but we respected each other and made it work. That all changed when the older roommate started acting strange. At first, it was small things. He'd be up at all hours making noise, his friends started coming over at weird times, and he seemed paranoid about everything. Then he missed his first rent payment. When the younger roommate asked him about it, he said he'd get the money to us the next day. Tomorrow came and went. Then the next week, then the next month. Meanwhile, his behavior was getting worse. He'd stay awake for days at a time, pacing around the house and muttering to himself. Strange people started showing up at all hours, sketchy folks who made both me and the younger roommate uncomfortable. The breaking point came when I walked into the living room one night and found him waving a gun around while completely out of his mind. I backed away slowly and immediately texted the other roommate to stay in his room until things calmed down. By this time, his debt had hit around $2,000. We couldn't cover it anymore, and honestly, we didn't want to. We found out through one of his friends that he'd developed a serious drug problem, specifically with crystal meth. Everything suddenly made sense. We decided to confront him about it. Both of us sat him down one evening when he seemed somewhat coherent. I told him we needed to talk about the rent situation and that he owed us $2,000. The younger roommate explained that we couldn't keep covering for him and that he needed to either catch up on payments or find somewhere else to live. His response caught us completely off guard. He told us that we couldn't actually evict him, so we'd have to cover his rent unless we wanted all of us to get evicted. He said it with this smug smile like he'd figured out some brilliant loophole. The audacity was incredible. Here was a guy who hadn't paid rent in months, who was bringing dangerous people into our home, and had literally threatened us with a weapon, and he thought he could just strong-arm us into covering his expenses indefinitely. That night, I started researching our options. I wasn't going to let this guy hold us hostage in our own home. That's when I discovered something called the Address Confidentiality Program. It's designed for people in unsafe living situations, domestic violence victims, people being stalked, things like that. If a caseworker determines you're in danger, your landlord has to let you out of your portion of the lease without any penalties. Given everything that had been happening, the drug use, the strangers, the gun incident, the escalating paranoia, I figured we might qualify. I contacted the program and explained our situation to a caseworker. They told me that based on what I was describing, it definitely sounded like an unsafe environment. The drug use alone was concerning, but adding in the weapon and the unknown individuals coming and going made it a clear safety issue. The process was surprisingly straightforward. After a few meetings and some paperwork, I got approved for the program. The younger roommate followed the same steps and got his own approval. We were both given 30 days notice to vacate our portions of the lease. During those 30 days, our problematic roommate was on cloud 9. He strutted around the house like he'd won the lottery, constantly making comments about how we were stuck covering his share forever. He asked us if we'd budgeted for his portion of next month's rent too. When I told him we'd see about that, he wanted to know what I meant and reminded me that we'd already admitted we couldn't evict him. He had no idea what was coming. I just shrugged and walked away. The younger roommate and I had already started secretly packing our things and looking for new places. We timed everything perfectly for a long holiday weekend when we both had extra time off work. The older roommate decided to go out of town that same weekend. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, we went into action. We'd already rented a moving truck and recruited some friends to help. In less than 8 hours, we had completely cleared out our belongings. I left a note on the kitchen counter explaining that we'd used the address confidentiality program to legally exit our portions of the lease, and that he was now solely responsible for the full rent going forward. I also included contact information for the landlord and suggested he call immediately to discuss his options. When he got back from his trip, my phone exploded with calls and texts. He wanted to know what we'd done and where all our stuff was. I told him we'd moved out and that we'd looked into our options like I'd said we would. He said it was messed up and that we couldn't just ditch him like that. The younger roommate explained that we actually could, and that we'd used a legal program designed for people in unsafe living situations. He reminded him that he was the one who'd created that unsafe situation. The older roommate called us terrible people and said what we'd done was underhanded. Here was someone who'd tried to manipulate us into paying his way indefinitely, and he was calling us terrible for finding a legal solution to get away from his chaos. We blocked his number after that. A few months later, I ran into a mutual friend who filled me in on what happened next. They told me the older roommate had gotten evicted about 6 weeks after we left because he couldn't make the full rent payment on his own. When I asked where he was living now, they said last they'd heard, he was crashing on his mom's couch and still hadn't gotten clean. I checked the local court database out of curiosity and sure enough, there was an eviction on record with his name on it. Part of me felt bad for him, but mostly I felt relief that we'd gotten out when we did. Our former roommate thought he could manipulate us into enabling his destructive behavior indefinitely. Instead, he ended up worse off than if he'd just been honest about his problems from the beginning and worked with us to find a solution. The address confidentiality program saved us from a situation that was only getting more dangerous. The caseworker even told me we should have applied sooner rather than waiting for things to get so extreme. If anyone reading this finds themselves in a similar situation, don't wait. There are resources available to help you get out safely. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.